You are watching Ukraine Today, where we are joined by Miss Inna Sovsun, the first Deputy Minister of Education in Ukraine. Inna, welcome to the show. Could you start by telling us how you are working with schools and educational facilities in the occupied areas of eastern Ukraine?
We don't have that much influence over what is happening on the occupied territories. So clearly we have very little contact, and the contact that we do have with the people who stayed over there in educational institutions is unofficial, and frankly speaking, it can be dangerous to the people who keep on communications with the Ukrainian Ministry of Education and Science. So I would say that the contacts are rather unofficial and very limited. A lot of people are either afraid to keep the communication with the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, or they don't want to do that. So there are different positions, but we for sure don't have a full picture as to what is happening within schools or universities in that region. Where we do have contact is with the institutions that have been evacuated from the region, with the children who have left the region with their parents, and we did a lot to help them get into the schools on the Ukrainian territory, which is controlled by the Ukrainian authorities. So that we can talk about. Contact with people who stayed on the territory is very limited at the moment.
So for a number of reasons, it is practically impossible for the Ministry of Education to provide education for the students that are in rebel-held territory. Do you know if there is education coming from anywhere else into these regions?
Well, there are, in terms of universities, since we have evacuated 16 universities. Of course, the evacuation included mainly the evacuation of people. So we have evacuated the people from that university's teaching staff, and students. Clearly, the buildings are still there, the equipment is still there, and there are some people who stayed within that territory and who claim to still run the universities over there. The problem is, of course, that they have no legitimacy in any country of the world. They have very limited capacity to provide education because a lot of academic staff have left the university. And there is the war basically going on there, so chances are that the quality of education is extremely low, even if it is happening over there. In terms of school, some schools are open, from what we know. A lot of those that are open, they have had some changes into their curriculum. They have included the history of Russian Federation, Russian language courses, and so on and so forth. But again, we don't have that much knowledge about the specifics of what is happening there.
So let's talk about the universities, universities and schools which have been evacuated. I know that the University of Donetsk went to Vinnytsia, and you said there was a total of 16 universities
Yes.
that have been evacuated. How are they doing?
Well, frankly speaking, differently. So the situation is different with different universities. For some universities, it was easier because they had some campuses in other towns. For instance, 2 universities from Lugansk, they had campuses in other towns of Lugansk Oblast. So they have evacuated there to their own campuses. So it's clearly a bit easy if you have the campus, you have the territory, you have the staff, and so on and so forth. Some universities, like Donetsk National University, they have evacuated to a totally new premises in a totally in a city where most of the academic staff has never been before. So it's clearly much more complicated for them. But on the other hand, Donetsk National University is one of the universities which had most of its staff evacuated, unlike some other universities where just a small portion of academic staff and students have been evacuated. So they're doing rather well. They're actually trying to see it on the positive side as a way of opening a new page in the university. When they got rid of the people who were they're very conservative, very different so there were different types of people in universities. And the conservative part, the pro-Russian part, they have stayed with the occupied territories. The European-minded, more progressive part, they have left the territory and come to Vinnytsia. And clearly, it's easier to build a different type of university within a community of the likely-minded people. They're trying to see the positive in that and try to build the university basically from scratch, but with a community that has very clear political standing. But some universities do have a lot of problems because only a small portion of their staff has evacuated and they don't have the opportunity to provide education on the level that is required by the standards and so on. So for some universities we are considering what their future should be, because we can either merge them with some other universities or that is a discussion at the moment. So the situation with the evacuated universities is very different. So some have been very successful, they're seeing the new opportunities and possibilities with the situation. Others are, they have more problems. But I would say that in general, most students, they did want to get evacuated. They did want to get a new place. Clearly they have a lot of problems, and clearly those people who did make a political choice to evacuate, to get to the Ukrainian territory, it was very difficult for them because they were losing their houses, they were losing their everything. The fact that they made this choice, and so many of them did, is actually very inspiring for the rest of us.
So at the minute there are some 1.3 million internally displaced in Ukraine. Of course, they have to go somewhere, so a lot of them have gone to cities in the east under the control of Ukraine. Some have come to Kiev, to Odessa, to Lviv. How are the schools and the universities in these cities coping with the influx of students and teachers?
That is, of course, we had to work out the specific mechanisms, but all of the children of IDPs, they have all got places in the schools. So they have all been placed in schools where they have moved to. So there was no problem with that. With the students, it's a bit more complicated because students from the universities, a lot of them, the biggest part of them, have got evacuated together with their universities. So if Donetsk National University moved to Vinnytsia, then the students moved there as well. But of course the problem is that the universities doesn't have enough dormitories.
And one final question. When we look ahead to the liberation of Donbass, how does the Ministry of Education plan to reintegrate the students back into Ukraine?
I would say that the program, the specifics of such program, would depend a lot on how and on what conditions the integration will be happening, and we cannot really predict that at the moment because now the political and the military situation is too unstable to try to predict anything. But what is for sure is that we shall need a lot of efforts put to reintegrate those children and teachers, students, professors back to the Ukrainian society, and not just in terms of providing them with legal documents, even though that in itself is a big part of the job, but also creating space for the dialogue within the society. How do you make peace with people that have been on the other side in a military conflict? I think that is a very complicated issue, and Ukraine doesn't really have experience with that. But of course, seen from the experiences of other countries, it takes years and years to deal with those issues. And it will not be easy, of course, because now we are seeing that a lot of intolerance is growing in the society towards people who stayed on the other side of this military conflict. So I think we should start thinking about that now. How do we reintegrate both, at the moment, at least the IDPs into the Ukrainian society, because even that creates some tension sometimes. But when Donbass is back to Ukrainian territory, when we regain the control over the territory, that of course will create a big nationwide program to reintegrate those people back into the Ukrainian society.
Inna, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have been watching Ukraine Today, where we have been joined by Miss Inna Sovsun, the first Deputy Minister of Education and Science in Ukraine. Thank you for watching.